All of us. Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of the Gin and Tonic Show. I'm Almighty Atheismo. I'm here with the Rationalizer, Stopspamming, and Klingschor. Today's topic is moral philosophy. If you'd like to join us with a question on our topic or a topic of your own choosing, just send a Skype contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show. If you call into the show, please mute and minimize your blog TV so that you don't see and hear everything on an echo and a delay, which will disorient you more than I'm disoriented now for some reason, and that will disrupt the flow of the show. Also, everyone who calls in is advised that this is streamed live over blog TV and recorded for later upload on YouTube. So, stop spamming. Before we get down to the meat of the topic that I've chosen, you had a story that you wanted to talk about.
Well, there's nothing that I would really like to talk about. Something that I find absolutely appalling, because there is a Muslim group, the Ansarina, who are going around Mali and destroying monuments, who have no reason whatsoever to go against any kind of ruling, but they are making a point of declaring the UNESCO not in charge of their buildings and saying God is unique and we are Muslims and UNESCO is what? So they're running around and they declare that they are going to destroy more of them. And the reason that they are given is that the UNESCO decided to put them all or declare them all as World Heritage Sites. And that is it. And this is like really old stuff. They call it the cradle of Islamic learning from the 5th century onwards. And what they are doing is destroying them forever and ever gone. That is amazing. And I don't know what kind of morality it takes to go and just go on a rampage and destroy things. Another example would be what I actually was going to mention on the last show, is that in Indonesia, an internet atheist who said, well, I don't think there's any God, on Facebook, he was arrested and he was fined $10,500 US because he said he's an atheist. And then they put him in jail.
How much?
For 2.5 years. $10,500 US.
How much do you think is? How much is that in their yearly wage? I mean, how many?
30 years worth.
30 years worth of a median income.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, all he did is on Facebook say, I don't think there's a God. Then they also ban Lady Gaga, and then they go and attack Indonesian Shias and saying that Shias are non-Muslims and have to be driven into the sea. I think this is being a Shia in the eyes of the Sunnis even worse than being a Jew. At least you've got an excuse. Being a Shia is apparently not an excuse. And the funniest, well, okay, now we've got Ramadan. So in I don't know if people are aware of that Indonesia, the boys are waking people up at 3 o'clock in the morning so that they can go and have the last meal before the sun comes up. And some residents are not amused because they are not Muslims and would rather sleep in instead of being woken up 3 o'clock in the morning. So now there have been complaints against these boys running around the streets 3 o'clock in the morning, banging on pots and things and waking everybody up. And the last story that I had, and this is, I think I mentioned this in my last video as well, I don't know, it's actually quite sad. I mean, look at the morality of this. In Indonesia, women have launched a club called Obedient Wives. In other words, they are teaching, they being women, Muslim women, are teaching other Muslim women how to be obedient wives. And this is like a franchise. They have 18 branches in Jordan and Malaysia, from all over the world. Muslim women are teaching other Muslim women to be obedient. I mean, this is so crazy.
I think it's a huge step forward, because we're constantly accusing them of teaching, 15th century values or 7th century, depending on. But see, that's some Victorian era stuff, learning how to be a prim and proper, obedient wife, walking around with the book on your head to make sure that you have poise. That is really progressive. Also, the other good news, banning Lady Gaga just goes to show that even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Anyway, these are just some examples in today's world, in today's reality of what is happening on this planet in connection with Muslims and morality. So I'd love to have somebody call in who is a Muslim who says, yes, of course, we do that. It's justified because. I'd love to hear that explanation.
Weren't the Buddhas of, was it called the Buddhas of Bamiyan or something?
Yeah, that was the Taliban.
Big Buddhas. And that was the first time I ever heard of the Taliban. I'd never heard of them before. And then I saw this news article, and there were these men in tanks riding over loads and loads of bottles of gin and whiskey and stuff, which I thought was a bit strange. And then they were running over televisions in their tanks. And then soon afterwards, they showed these Buddhas, and then they blew them up. And I was absolutely gobsmacked. And that was a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think what UNESCO need to do is, if they want to preserve the world, is go around declaring everything to not be a World Heritage Site. Because I go, no, that's rubbish, you can knock that down if you want, and then everyone will leave it alone.
If you were a corrupt UNESCO official, you could make a lot of money. You know what I mean? Some company wants to build a highway, and there's someone who won't sell their house. World Heritage Site. Oh shit! Run for the hills.
No, they're also destroying mosques, by the way.
You know what? That's the other thing is, it's not just other religions. It's the extreme conservative forms of Islam throughout history have cannibalized their own religious sites and structures. I don't know if you have your ear to the ground on stuff happening in Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is probably foremost in doing this, in that they've bulldozed countless sites of historical significance because they don't want them to treat these as sort of lesser shrines or
something that has always really disturbed. I mean, destroying this. Was it? There's a word for this, iconoclasty or something. Yeah, I think it's iconoclasty. I think that's the correct word to refer to people destroying wonderful ancient stuff. Christians used to do it as well, like the Byzantines and so forth, in different periods. But this is like, especially when it came to the Wahhabis destroying Muhammad's grave, and this is something that, like, imagine if we had Muhammad's body, what we could do.
Wait, they destroyed a structure built on it, like a mausoleum, or did they actually disturb the body?
I'm not sure if they just poured concrete over the whole thing, or if they actually dug it up and just smashed it all around. I can't remember exactly what they did, but they've just done that to so many of these ancient graves. And imagine what we could do if we had Muhammad's body. Right, we could tell you something, if it's preserved, I mean, which it probably is, because it's the fucking desert. You know, I mean, like, we could tell you so much. We could tell you, like, first of all, we could prove that he existed, and we could tell you what kind of person he was, and as in, you know, ethnicity and descent, and what he died of, perhaps, and all these kinds of things, you know, which would be so illuminating.
Yeah, it's a shame. You know, when I was sort of boning up on, you know, the overall lore of the religion and the Arab Empire and so forth, I found the history itself, aside from the modern religious implications, I found it really quite interesting. And it's a shame that these things are being destroyed. What else? Oh, yeah.
On the subject of morality,
yeah,
can I also offer a tale? Now, it's remarkable to me just how religion just singularly fails to make people act better. And it's just like, gee, if Islam doesn't make you a better person, what's the point? Like, it really just doesn't seem to make any kind of difference. And I'll give you, well, in this case I would actually say that their actions weren't, you know, were in accordance to Islam, but in any case, here's a little story. And this is just incredible, really. There's a girl from the region where I grew up in who converted to Islam at quite a young age, I think 15 or 16. No, she was from a troubled family and a troubled background. She was kicked out of home around that age or something, I don't know. It's not relevant. The point is that at approximately the age of 16, she was tricked into a muta, temporary marriage, with a faqih practicing Shiite pretending to be a Sunni.
Huh.
Now, I can't remember how long she was married to him for, a few months. And it turns out that this Shiite, who wasn't even a Sunni, his revert, or let's just say convert, because that's what they actually are. Muslims like to say that when someone converts to Islam, they've reverted because we're all born Muslim. Let's just say convert because it's more accurate. He already had a wife, a convert, and she would actually help him hunt down and exploit Western convert women who converted to Islam. And there's such a problem that there's actually signs about them in mosques in the Muslim community that they're from, because there's such a problem. In any case, this convert girl eventually left this man, and then she married a sheikh,
It's a family show. Watch your language. No.
Come on, a Muslim scholar or whatever you call them. Call them scholars and insult.
Yeah.
A Muslim cleric who made her wear the niqab. And who raped her and hit their 3-year-old daughter. What was done about the fact that he raped her? Nothing. She would talk to her about it to her Muslim friends in the Muslim community. Nothing was done because he's a sheikh, you know. And so eventually because when he hit their 3-month-old daughter, she walked out on him, causing him to pronounce the 3rd talaq. So then she married a Salafi, or a Wahhabi, who also met her wearing niqab, and he was a Sayyid. He was a member of the Al-Bayt, which is Muhammad's bloodline, and he was psychologically abusive to her when she was having problems, and he strangled her. But she managed to get a divorce from him. Now, throughout this whole thing, I mean, where was Islam to inform the morality and to make better the behavior of the lying, deceiving Shiite who exploited a 16-year-old girl? Where was the morality of the religion of Islam to guide the actions of the sheikh who raped her and hit their 3-month-old daughter? Where was the morality of the Wahhabi or the Salafi who was abusive to her and who strangled her? This is my question. And of course, the answer is, there is no morality because these, you know, I mean, you're allowed to rape your wife in Orthodox.
Yeah, I think that...
But Taqiyyo, practicing Shiite, I don't think wasn't, you know, nothing he did was particularly un-Shiite. I mean, the muta is a muta. You can do muta in Shia Islam. And, I mean, the Salafi, well, I don't think, you know, he was too far out of his way, so...
Well, it seems like more and more, if you were to bring that up in front of many conservative Sunni Muslims, they would just laugh in your face because they'd say, well, Shia aren't Muslims. I'm hearing that more and more. I don't know if it's been that way for a while or if it's due to rising tension because of various regional tensions in the Middle East, and it's sort of percolating outwards. But I hear that more and more. Oh, well, you think Shia are Muslims? No, they're not. I don't know what... I guess are they categorized as pagans or heretics? I don't know. I mean, obviously, historically, they were considered a heretical sect, but...
I had a discussion with a guy, started on YouTube. His name was Jajabul Returns or something. And I brought up the subject of Aisha and I got blocked from his channel. I later, accidentally, I wasn't stalking him, stumbled across his Facebook page and tried to discuss it on there with him, and I got blocked from there. But basically his position was it's okay to have sex with a girl who's only 9 if she looks mature, blah blah, you know, the usual line. And while I was on Facebook recently posting posting information about the Gin and Tonic show, I came across his profile again, and apparently about 2 months ago he apostatized.
Huh.
He's no longer a Muslim, but and all his posts are about I will respect you, but I won't respect your disgusting religion. Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl, that's terrible. And stuff. And I thought, well, you know, originally he had morality suppression, and then it took him an apostasy step in order to act more morally. So I think that religion teaches you to go against what feels instinctively right. I mean, you've got to ask the question, if it's wrong, if it's right, why would a supreme being make it inherent in us all to feel that it's wrong?
Yeah, exactly. You never know. What I had on a forum, what I did is I brought up the example of how the scientists, the so-called scientists, the academics from the West, were being corrupted by al-Zindani. And I said that he was the one who organized everything and then made a video making it look as though they were doing something, and I called him a scoundrel. I got a warning for this. Why did I get a warning for this? Because I insulted a scholar. So it doesn't matter whether you are right, what the truth is. It's the same as what Kling said earlier. If he's a sheikh, if he's a scholar, you're not allowed to say anything in the least negative about him.
I'm bringing in our first guest. Don't start talking. I'm bringing in our first guest. He's been waiting a bit.
Just as he comes in, I don't know how true it is or not, that Zindani was supposed to have been the person that influenced Osama bin Laden to take his religion seriously. And
right.
He did it when he was doing a tour of universities, and the tour was Miracles in the Quran. And Osama bin Laden was convinced by these miracle claims and decided to start practicing his religion. So that's quite interesting, isn't it?
If only he joined some other club, bird watching. I don't know. Welcome to the show, El Nino.
Destroying
What do you have
ancient
for us
monuments.
today?
Hello lads, how's it going? Like I said in the chat, I just wanted to discuss with you about creationism and God, you know, and I am a creationist, so I'm assuming that some people in here don't have the same view.
You'd be right.
Right. Well, so are you an atheist, or what's people's religious beliefs in here?
A horse walked up to a creationist, and the creationist said, "Why the long face?" And the horse said, "Evolution."
How bloody rude! Right, well, you know what? One of the things I want to bring up is, well, the scientific theories are always changing, and you know, you only really have science to go on. But if you lived, let's say, 1,000 years ago, would you just not believe that the Earth was flat?
Well, it depends. I've been reading some Plato, and I actually got into an argument with one of our former hosts on this panel who actually liked Socrates and Plato, and I think Socrates and Plato were just idiots, because Socrates is of course, Plato's character, so people, there's the words of one are attributed to the other and vice versa, because Socrates has none of his own surviving writings. So basically, everything Socrates says is attributed to Plato's thoughts, at least to a degree. Anyway, he's talking about how there are ghosts in graveyards, and how there's, he talks about what he thinks the Earth looks like, and he thinks that the whole known area in the Mediterranean was at the bottom of like a giant basin, and then there were all these crazy rivers running everywhere, and then he says that there's all these chimeric creatures like a Cerberus or a Manticore and all the centaurs and all the other things of Greek legend. And I said, I can't respect someone who believes so much miscellaneous psychedelic superstitious crap. And Godless Saudi said, well, he lived at a time where probably everyone believed that. And I thought, I don't know if I buy that as an excuse, because, even then you could apply at least some reasoning and say, well, wait a minute, has anyone ever reliably given a report about a manticore or a centaur. I mean, how reliable? You can still apply some deduction. And as a matter of fact, Socrates complains about people at the time who were skeptical or even atheistic. So, in answer to your question, so I go on these long tangents. Sorry, but in answer to your question, I think that if I lived back then, I would have been certainly raised with those beliefs if they were prevalent. But I'd like to think that eventually I would have thought it through and come to the conclusion that they were unfounded and probably wrong.
Before we carry on, we've just been featured, so I want to tell everyone who's watching now that this is a bi-weekly broadcast discussing the subject of Islam. Okay, please continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, well, the example I used there about the Earth being flat and all, that is a very extreme example, but going back, like, obviously less than 1,000 years, people used to believe in, like, different scientific theories that, like, theories aren't, like, completely proven, like, but, like, I mean, 1,000 years, in 1,000 years' time, people could be looking back and thinking that we were idiots for believing in evolution and the Big Bang Theory.
Well, first of all, if I lived in the past, would I have thought the Earth was flat? Not if I was a friend of Eratosthenes, who thousands of years ago not only knew that the Earth was spherical, but he pretty accurately worked out the radius of the Earth as well. And the way he did it is he stuck sticks in the ground on a specific day of the year and measured how long the shadows were. So basically what he did is he used an experiment to gather facts, and on those facts he came up with not a strong theory, but a theory nonetheless. You mustn't confuse a layman's theory, which is someone you'll talk to down the street that says, my mate sneaks out at night and robs shops. That's my theory as to why he's out late every night. That's a layman's theory. A scientific theory is based on observable facts, and the theory is pretty useless unless it makes predictions, and then the strength of the theory becomes stronger as those predictions are shown to be true. You've got different levels of scientific theories. You've got weaker ones which haven't got lots of supporting evidence, or haven't got many predictions, or are very difficult to test. And then you've got very, very strong ones which have got an abundance of evidence. There's many, many facts backing them up. There's many, many predictions that theory has made which have all shown to be true. And if that theory as well spans many different scientific areas, that makes it even stronger still. And evolution is probably the most strongest scientific theory that we've got. It's corroborated in so many different ways across so many disciplines of science that to say one day we're going to find out that we all just sprang into existence just like that, it's practically a zero probability.
Yeah, right. Okay, fair enough. Right, well, here's the thing. I am a creationist, but here's the thing. Like, how does the evolution theory disprove that prove that there is no God?
Well, this is completely irrelevant. What you'll find is that people who don't believe in either are inclined to disbelieve in supernatural explanations, or inclined to disbelieve in God, or whether they've come to that conclusion after looking at one piece of evidence or another, you'll find that people tend to default to the best known theory by the top researchers, which in this case happens to be evolution. Strictly speaking, though, there's no connection from our end. It's very much a one-way street in that many of the major world religions teach things that are simply incompatible with some of the things that we've been discovering through research. But there's nothing intrinsic about... I mean, you could have a theistic religion that incorporates either evolution or the Big Bang. The problem is that major world religions like Christianity and Islam, of course, don't feature this, unless some very liberal members of their religion engage in revisionism or reinterpolation of the texts. But strictly speaking, they're separate issues.
Yeah, evolution doesn't prove that there's no God. The idea of a God and evolution aren't incompatible. What evolution usually disproves is a specific religion, or at the very least, a specific interpretation of a religion.
Yeah, I know
so,
you're saying.
Islam, it's pretty clear from reading the Quran that it says that Adam was made out of clay and blah, 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 and it's a very, very creationist thing, which is why you'll find a lot of Muslims don't don't accept evolution. But then the thing about religion is it tends to adapt. When it's cornered, if it can, it will adapt. And when the scientific evidence mounts up, these people have either got to go into denial, they've got to cite conspiracy theories, people are conspiring to not publish the real evidence that creationists have found that disproves evolution, or they adapt their beliefs. And there was a UK imam who tried to do that. He'd gone through the Quran, gone through evolution. He thought he was going to see that evolution was a load of rubbish. I think he's a physics lecturer or something. And he decided evolution is definitely true. And he tried to reconcile it to his religion. And he thought he'd found a way of evolution being true and the Quran not being wrong. And then he stood up in front of a room of Muslims and tried to say, look, the facts are on their side. Evolution's true, but don't worry, the Quran isn't wrong, I can explain to you how. And they all stood up and shouted at him, are you saying that Adam came from a monkey and stuff like that? He got shouted down, and then shortly after on his blog he said, I'm very sorry, I retract what I said, I shouldn't have said it, I didn't mean it, and so. And that's a really bad thing. The problem is within a religion, if enough people are following that religion and have the opposing opinion, they will suppress the opinions of others.
Well, I have a question for Rash. You said that Adam was made from clay, meaning humans are made from clay. But if we came from clay, then why is there still clay?
Can I try an analogy, please?
Yes, please.
Okay. What people don't understand is that science is a tool, all right? And embryology is a pair of pliers or a hammer. A hammer does not have a worldview. A hammer does not disprove the existence of anything. So if you have a tool, there are ways of applying it. There are ways of misapplying it. You have to know what you're doing. And if you use the tool correctly, it will give you the correct result. And that is all that it is. So evolution cannot prove anything. It does not do anything. It is just a tool. It just analyzes. It describes. And that is all that it does. And it's so easy.
It really annoys me in movies and popular culture how everyone's like, holds up his phone or something, or that's science. No, that's technology. Science is just a tool. Like,
exactly.
Yes, that factory is science, or they represent science. It's like Avatar. It's sort of like, oh yeah, all these big machines. This is science. Science is bad. And it's like, no, it's a technique. That's it. It's the method that we use to understand how the universe works.
I remember hearing a comment once in an audience at a talk, and someone put their hand up and said, "Do you think that if we found human remains in the Precambrian era, do you think that would be more likely to be proof of time travel than disproof of evolution?"
I actually have a question for you. Are you agnostic or atheist?
I'm sorry, could you ask again?
Are you agnostic or atheist?
Oh boy, this is...
I think they're the same thing.
Well,
agnostic atheist.
Yeah,
if you're an atheist, you can only be an agnostic atheist, because you cannot be agnostic atheist because you can't know that there is no God. You can be an agnostic theist. You can believe in theism but not have belief that you know it, or you can be a Gnostic theist, so you're a theist and believe it's true. But all atheists are agnostic.
Yeah, I think he means the very popular incorrect perception of what agnosticism is, which is on the fence.
Yeah,
and I think that if you're on the fence,
50-50. That's the problem.
Well,
people say agnostic and they think, oh, they fence it as it's 50-50.
Yeah.
God could or couldn't exist. It's on the flip of a coin. And
I actually have another question for you. If you don't think God is real, then how can you explain the movie The Passion of the Christ?
You can't be serious.
Yeah, I think it was a really good. If I explain it, what was his name?
But like, it's real.
I think you blew it.
It's real too, but it's Jesus.
Yeah, sorry, Oliver. That was just too. That was the line in the sand, Oliver, and you crossed it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what though, you're getting better at the accent because I don't think I spotted many slips in that accent.
There were in the beginning.
No, but it did slowly morph into a completely different region, but it didn't bipolar slip between the two or anything. It was like language evolution in fast forward. It was quite good.
I think we can all agree that the Passion of the Christ was so bad it's proof against the existence of benevolent God.
I haven't even seen it.
But thanks El Nino, and call it under another identity. Just have a fun.
So hold on one second.
Just have a funnier punchline. Okay, that's all we ask. Thanks.
Hold on.
I thought The Passion of the Christ was a great film. I love gore films. So, seeing the whips with the chains with all the claws in, hitting him in the skin and ripping his flesh and stuff. And I was just sitting there thinking, this is a real gore film. And if I'd realised Christianity was this ass, I'd have gone to church.
It's funny about Christianity. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and someone had called them. They said they played a game with some dark themes to it. Like a game with a lot of those jump scares and a monster popping up out of nowhere and so forth. And posted up online, and someone said, "Oh well, you're a Satanist. I hope you're going to burn in hell. I'm a Christian." And I thought something just sort of clicked, because the guy said, "Oh wow, Christianity seems like a lovely religion." And I thought, and this of course applies to Islam as well, but I think a lot of, especially a lot of U.S. Christians and moderate to liberal, they talk about their faith in such glowing terms as though it's all about being gentle and forgiving and so forth. But when if I were to tell them that there was a group in their town that they pray, it's a cult focused around human sacrifice as the core story of their faith, and they gather together and then they pray to their dark master to punish people in a pit of fire and shadow forever. It would probably conjure up an image of pentagrams and candles and people in red cloaks and so forth. But it's major mainstream religion. What are you going to do? The disconnect is just
religion does solve all our problems. You've got to keep that in mind. I was because I've joined Facebook under an alias that I won't reveal, and I've befriended a few hundred Muslims on there. Because that's the thing I notice, if you add 2 or 3 Muslims, suddenly 100 will want to be your friend. And the amount of stuff going on this wall, and it's all propaganda. Don't trust the media. Don't worry about your enemies. Worry about the friend that's stabbing you in the back, and all this. And they're really trying to make each other paranoid with these posts. But the one that stuck out in my mind was, it was basically saying, Islam has found solutions to these problems. What? Hasn't the West found solutions for them yet? And at the top it said, what? No solutions. 1, alcohol. 2, racism. 3, excess number of unmarried women. It's like, it reminded me a little bit of a thing I saw on TV, and it was a guy had invented a pointing device which you attach to your nose with a little rubber fingertip on the end, and you can operate your iPhone by moving your head. So if ever you want to operate your iPhone with one hand free, you can use this strap-on nose to do it. And it's like, talk about creating an invention and then inventing the problem afterwards. And that's exactly what it was. It's like, oh, we've got a solution to there being too many unmarried women in the world. Let's see. Oh, let's invent the problem of having too many. No, we've got the solution of having men being able to marry lots of women. So the problem must be that there are too many unmarried women.
Yeah, we have
another caller. Infidel always.
Just want to quickly say, it's a very common claim that there are heaps more women than men in the world, which is wrong. There are actually more men than women in the world. Last time I checked, officially, the official face of mankind is a Han Chinese male of, I think, of some 20-something years old. It's common apologetic is that men die in battle. And back in history, men were always dying in battle, which is why there were, then men had to have multiple wives to account for all the men who died and thus the excess women. This apologetic forgets that women were always dying in childbirth. So I think it kind of evened out a little bit.
And that only really applies if the women aren't allowed to work and be financially independent. Rather than letting a single man have sex with lots of women, what you could just do is say women are allowed to have jobs, and then they don't need a man to look after them. They can just go out and look after themselves.
Okay, Infidel Always, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, I want to talk about that. If we think for some time...
Yes? Yeah. Okay, your sound quality is really, really poor. We can barely hear you.
Okay, now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, when we think of perspective and universe.
Wow. How do do this? Can anyone else understand what he's...
Hello?
No, I'm sorry. For some reason, the audio is shocking.
Yeah, it's very oddly distorted.
Type the question and then we'll answer it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do it that way.
I think the last time I looked, ironically, there are more men in the United Arab Emirates than there are women. And, of all the places in the world for there to be more men than women,
hello?
I thought that was great.
We can usually hear you when you do that initial sound test. Then when you start talking, it goes to this...
Okay, now? Now?
Yeah. Okay, try again. Let's try this again.
Yeah, now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Most of the time when we talk about evolution and the existence of God, it's always about the earth. Why can't we think about if you think about many earths, many type of civilizations and say a vast universe, then maybe on some places or some earths, evolution is true, and on some places, because if there was a Big Bang, before Big Bang, there must be a very vast empty space, and maybe many other things that is outside of the scope of the Big Bang. Then entire thing cannot be manipulated. Maybe evolution is just a program by the God. Like computer programmers program. There can be many programs like evolution, and so on the vast perspective, I think there must be some entity controlling so much of the complexity that is outside of the scope of maybe higher grade aliens even, or each of our minds.
Okay,
Yeah,
I don't know.
But as far as I understood it, the question was, is evolution, we always look at the point of view of Earth, but considering how massive the universe is, maybe evolution isn't a universal truth, but in some places there is creationism. Yes, this
really?
is...
that was...
that's what I believe was the point.
Yeah.
And, that's fine, that's great, that's a hypothesis. But obviously we only concentrate on the Earth because that's the only place we've got any evidence in order to base strong scientific theories. So I'd just like to say, nice hypothesis. Now where's the fucking evidence?
Yeah. The thing is, there was this one user who was saying, well, there can't be life on other planets because, they're talking about chemistry, but the chemistry that makes life isn't normal chemistry, it's bizarro chemistry. And I thought, this guy's out of his mind. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, these things are very common throughout the known universe. They're all among the elements that are formed. There's two basic cosmic events that act as like a forge for the different elements on the table that occur in nature. And I think the first 11 are from the first minor event, and then the major event creates all the different metals and alkalines and all that crap. So, these are all common things, and at this time, there's no reason to believe that they will bond any differently at a different point in space. You know what I mean? In other words, if I go to Alpha Centauri and I mix, red Kool-Aid and blue Kool-Aid, I'm going to get a purple-looking Kool-Aid just like I would here on Earth. There's at this point no reason to believe that. I mean, if and frankly, the thing about evolution and creationism, I think that it's a tacit inclusion in the argument that we are talking about how life came to be in its current form here on this planet. I don't understand. What can you do with what Rationalizer was saying in a complete absence of evidence? We need to keep exploring. The thing is as well,
I do seem to remember reading something some time ago. The inspection of comets revealed revealed like nucleotide bases or some nuclear bases of DNA or something. So if I'm not mistaken, I think that we have actually seen evidence that base pairs of DNA have formed independently of life on Earth and have crashed down to Earth in comets.
Mm-hmm. But it's still...
So that's not any proof of evolution on other planets.
But the question is,
if we do have evolution here on Earth, we have evolution because we can test it. It's like I said, it's science, it's a tool. So it's the hammer. So we have a nail, we have the hammer, there you go, it's proof. Now what you're doing is you're inventing an invisible nail. You cannot hit the invisible nail with the science, with the hammer that we have here today. But the question actually is, does your question have any consequences? In other words, if you are asking, do we know whether evolution is true on other planets? The answer is no, because we cannot test it there. But now, is there any follow-up? Is there any consequence out of this?
Well, but for each chemical reactions, we do need the ingredients. And if there was certain time that the chemical reaction created the entire universe, where did the ingredients came from?
That has nothing to do with evolution. Are you changing the topic now?
No. But I am saying that God must exist. I am talking about the God, the ultimate entity that provided the ingredients.
What ultimate entity? Where do you get this from?
It's rational thinking. I don't need any book for it. It's just everything needs someone to create.
No, this is not rational. This is wishful thinking. I'm sorry. This is not rational. This is wishful thinking. If you want to demonstrate that there is a need for something ultimate, you have to actually show it.
Are we talking about a specific God? Are we talking
No.
about
the God that controls everything. The root.
Are you a religious person?
Yes, I am.
And which religion do you believe is true?
I am Hindu. No, I don't believe it's true, but I am Hindu. I am born in a Hindu family.
So you're a social Hindu rather than actually believing that Hinduism is true. Is that right?
No. Yeah. I am a Hindu. I believe in Hinduism, but I don't believe in anything they say or they write.
Do you believe in the creation story of Hinduism?
No, I believe in creation stories of the Sanatan Dharma, the Om, the energy.
So what about Brahma?
Brahma is the energy. The Om, the Brahma, this is the energy, Aham Brahmasmi, that's it. That is the God. There is one single thing and everything is made up on that.
Okay, so you have the Trinity as described in the Bhagavad Gita.
No. Actually, I believe in that there was something on the top. There's the Brahma and everything else is just the departments. And because the Hinduism is so old that departments keep on going until it's millions and millions and millions, something like that.
But you know that there are a lot of myths associated with this. how
Earth,
how the universe was created, how it is being destroyed, how it is being held in equilibrium, how life came about. There are so many different myths associated with this. I think your actual question is there really any evidence that none of these gods are actually necessary?
No, actually, but in Hinduism there are no many gods. There is only one God, that is the energy, the Brahma. Everything else is, what you say in the titans in English, the sub-gods or the departments.
Well, they have functions. They have different functions.
Yeah, like for water, there is some department, and the Indra Devta controls that, something like that. But the God is one, the energy, the ultimate entity, and then it's divided into three gods, the Om, and then so on, something like that.
It makes perfect sense, because an entity powerful enough to create an entire universe needs to delegate smaller jobs to lesser gods.
Yeah.
Because obviously, he gets a bit tired, and you want to go to bed sometimes, don't you? Let the other gods do things like make the clouds and do the earthquakes and stuff.
Rash brings up an interesting point that I've wondered about, and that is why are there either different aspects or different or angels? It's funny, actually. I had just recently read the Mahabharata and the epic of Rama, the Ramayana, and they were interesting reads. Really long. The Mahabharata especially was very long and a bit dry, but they're good literature, I think. Some of the best religious literature that can actually pass as literature, and that it's entertaining and makes you want to read more. But sometimes, when I think that there are people who base a modern day religion on it, I can't fathom it, to be honest. And like, we're not saying this stuff to offend you, but it's sometimes the better the story, the harder it is for me to understand why people would believe that it's true. There was one part, in the Ramayana, where there's this race of monkey people, and one of them, they're standing around saying, well, we need to cross the ocean, but the ocean is hundreds and hundreds of miles long before you get to where the demon king has his city. And then one of them's like, well, I'm old. In my prime, I could jump pretty far, but right now I can only jump about 200 miles. And then another one says, well, I injured my foot and I can only jump 400 miles. And then one of them says, well, I'm in my prime and I can jump 900 miles across the ocean. I said, well, then you're the only one who can make the distance. So he gets a running start and he jumps through the air 900 miles so that he's flying, and he actually meets some other creature en route and has a conversation with it as he's flying through the air, and then he lands, and then I guess he has shoes with really good arch support, and then he kills a bunch of demons and sneaks around, and then he gets captured, and they set his tail on fire, but this princess says a prayer that prevents his tail from getting burned, and there's all this stuff. Now, like I said, as stories, they're great. This is awesome stuff, but I can't imagine that. I'm sorry, I have to pick on Hinduism especially, in that the imagery in Hindu literature seems so psychedelic compared to other religions. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine people being literal about any of it.
I can't.
Yeah,
you know what?
yeah,
I really.
Well,
sorry,
let's let her
carry on. You're the guest. Go on.
Yeah, let the guest come back.
Yeah, actually, the Hinduism or the Hindu people, they are basically imaginary people. They believe in the power, the image, and all that on gods. Actually, it's not the essential Vedas of Hinduism doesn't have anything like that. But they are just unreadable. They are long, they are vast, they are written in old Sanskrit, and so nobody bothers about them. And these stories are interesting, so they read these stories and they make up stories, and it's going like that. Even you are talking about Ramayana. Even Ramayana is known as Mahakavya, the great poetry in India. It is not actually to say that it's something related to religion. No, it's a great poetry. It's a Mahakavya. Say it like that.
Your quality is really fading. You might want to.
Yeah, it's just a poetry. Read it, enjoy it. If you find any morality, that's good. Other than that, it's not like that. It's the essential book of Hinduism. No, it's not.
But you know, you said something quite telling earlier. You said you thought about everything that's created as a creator, blah blah blah. It makes sense, and I think that's your biggest downfall. Is why should it make sense? It doesn't have to make sense. What matters is that you've got evidence to back it up. And you know, some of the things that we've got evidence for that seem to be true based on all of the evidence make absolutely no sense whatsoever. You're making the mistake of believing that human brains are adequate machines to make sense of the entire universe, that we can understand anything if we put our minds to it. And that's just simply not true. Our brains have evolved to do simple things like spot things and kill them, spot things and run away from them, make things that will help us to survive and things like that. They're not really designed to understand really weird things like quantum mechanics and stuff like that. This stuff makes absolutely no sense to human brains at all. Our brains just don't work that way. So for you to say the universe must be created by some god because that makes sense, that is a really big logical flaw.
Yeah, that can be, but you know, think as if that evolution started from somewhere. At least, if you say from the smallest thing as electrons, there was something that existed anywhere in the universe, anywhere. I don't know what it is, but then where did it come from?
Well,
everybody knows the answer. Everybody knows abiogenesis is when you have non-organic chemicals coming together to form organic molecules. So we know that. The only thing we don't know is the process. Well, we think we know, but we don't have any proof for that. So it still doesn't mean that it needs to be like that, and it still doesn't mean that it has to be a supernatural being doing that. Just because we can't for 100% explain everything, I mean, you need to appreciate that the science, the science that we're talking about here, has only been around a couple of years, a couple of decades. So you can't just go and expect everything to be answered within the first couple of years that we start looking at this. So, no, we do not have to explain anything, and if you want to start asking questions like that, then you will be asked yourself, then please explain your God or your creator. Show us the process that if you think that the creator did it, show me the process, because it becomes nonsensical after a while.
Can you jump into the conclusion before you've gone through the process of proving anything? You just start off with a question and think, well, you know, it makes sense that it would be made by someone, therefore it was made by someone. And, you know, you do none of the work in the middle, and that's why faith is really idle. It tells you something's true, and then you decide that it's true, and nobody does any work in the middle to work out what the facts are.
I found, while you guys were talking, I searched for distillation of William Lane Craig's version of the cosmological argument, and he says, okay, well, the universe must have a cause, and that cause must be beyond space and time, and it must be personal. Now, the thing about being beyond space and time seems like a run-of-the-mill non sequitur. The thing about it must be personal seems completely like nonsense. But he has this little list of these things that must follow, none of which do. And, you know, I think, strictly speaking, I think any professional logistician would say the only trait that either an entity that is its own cause or had no cause is that it had no cause or was its own cause. That's the only trait that it necessarily must have. Anything else you can possibly imagine or might reflexively attach to it, those are all non sequiturs unless you have some other supporting evidence. You know, so like with Craig's argument, you know, if we say, okay, well, the universe had a cause, there must have been this cause itself is if we're going to say it's self-caused, the the trait that allows it to cause itself is the only trait that it must necessarily have. If it's without a cause because it's somehow timeless or doesn't flow along the fourth dimension the way we traditionally think, though, its timelessness is the only necessary trait. Sentience is completely unnecessary. The only sentience we've observed, as a matter of fact, is our own and those of other, relatively intelligent animals, and that's been emergent. So, the idea that there was already a fully developed sentience before, any of the known universe existed, there's nothing to support that.
Making your God the exception to the rule really reminds me of something off a comedy series I once heard, and it was, in Britain, if you want to buy sweets, you go to the sweet shop. If you want to buy a sweet shop, you go to the sweet shop shop. And if you want to buy a sweet shop shop, then you're just being silly.
Anyone else have... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, can I start off with the second topic, the morality, because I think we have already talked too much about evolution.
Great,
okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, if anybody of you know about Dr. Zakir Naik.
Yes.
I once watched one of his video, and he was describing, first thing, why to eat meat. And second thing, the most interesting thing for me was that he described how moral it is to kill an animal by using the Islamic method, the zubah, the 3 cuts, the 2.5 cuts actually. And he said that this is so moral that the nerves cut down and the goat never feels single pain while blood is flowing out of the body. But I don't see any point. I mean, how can you know if...
Have you ever watched a video of an animal having its throat slit and then either bleeding to death or breathing in its own blood and choking to death? Have you ever seen a video of that?
Yeah, I have seen real animal actually.
So if you were given a choice of 2 different ways to die, would you go through the process of having your throat cut and going through that experience, or would you have a bullet in the head which would render you unconscious immediately? Which do you think would hurt, would be the less traumatic?
I think cutting through the entire spine, I think it will be painless. Scientific method says that if your spine is cut down, then there is no pain, I think.
Spine? You're saying that the Muslim ritual killing cuts the spine? Is that what you're saying?
No. You asked me for an option, and I'm saying that.
But yeah, okay.
Muslim. Yeah, but Muslims cut. Yeah,
it's because you used the word cut and then spine, and because you said
okay.
cut, I thought you were talking about...
It's very easy. The answer to your question is Nike is lying.
Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is Zakir Naik owns the biggest Islamic broadcasting satellite station in the entire world.
TV.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
If Islam says it, then it's true, because that's what makes Zakir Naik rich.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's snake oil salesman.
Okay, I think we can leave it at that.
Okay. So, Infidel, I'm going to let you go because we have some other callers backed up. Thank you for calling in, and I hope you haven't burned any bridges here. Obviously, we might have stepped on the toes of yet a third major world religion today. Okay. Take care, my friend. Goodbye.
Okay.
And what a fitting name.
The Ramayana is actually a really kick-ass book. I'm just saying.
Tell us everything about it.
Well, before you do, I just want to say, sometimes you start telling stories about a man who knocks on people's doors selling burritos, and someone will say something, and you'll go off on the most fantastical, ridiculous stories. And then you started to do this about people jumping really far with bad ankles and stuff. And I thought, oh God, he's gone off on one again. And he was going on for so long, and then he jumps 900 miles and he's got really good shoes on and stuff. And I thought, oh my God, someone's got to stop him now, because now he's getting really, really silly. And then you revealed, no, you're not making it up, you're just recounting what you read. I couldn't believe it.
Okay, well, the Ramayana, okay, for the little synopsis, here's my book report on the Ramayana, which I do recommend everyone read. Okay, Ram he's actually an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, the guardian of the three major Hindu beings at the top of the pantheon, right? Okay, and he's sent there for the purpose of destroying the king of the demons in this one island nation, right? So, you know, he doesn't know at first about his destiny, because he's like, when Vishnu creates an incarnation, the incarnation always turns out to be very strong and brave and wise and so forth, but they're not. It doesn't have all of its power. But anyway, so that you've got this powerful warrior prince, and one of the king's consorts or wives conspires against him and has him exiled. And so while he's living in the forest, his fiancée gets kidnapped by the demon king. And then so you're preparing for the showdown with the demons, and before the first fight, because there is kind of a slow build-up, you're going to wonder, like, okay, what is the combat going to be like in the book, right? So then, he's facing off against the first group of demons, and his method of fighting is he has a bow and arrow, and he fires it like a machine gun. He just showers of like thousands of arrows because he has this unlimited quiver, and this is like something you'd only see in a Japanese anime or something. I can just imagine this guy's arm. This is like if Dragon Ball featured bows and arrows. It's just so completely over the top. He's just going and firing all these arrows, and they're getting mowed down like it's World War I, and they're crossing the no man's land, and all these demons are dying. It's a great book.
And the moral of the story?
Don't fuck with a guy with a magic bow and arrow.
Uh-huh.
The moral of the story is, if you're going to make up stories when the best weapon is a bow and arrow, don't write a book about lasers shooting from people's eyes, because you won't know that that's possible.
Next, please. Or should I first tell you about the book I'm reading?
Yeah, but then we'll bring on our next guest.
Not kidding.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, I shared a book. It's only fair you can share a book.
Given the topic is Islam and morality, can I make a quick aside?
Yes.
A moral aside?
Yeah, well, it definitely pertains to morality. In the Quran, in Surat Al-Ma'idah, I think it is, I don't know, Surah 5, verse 33, it says, surely I'm quoting the Muhammad M. Ghali translation here. Surely the only recompense of the ones who war against Allah and His Messenger and diligently endeavor to do corruption on the earth is that they should all be massacred or crucified, or that their hands and legs should be cut asunder alternately, or they should be exiled from the land. Now, the context for this was, as revealed in Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 38, Hadith number 4351, is some people of Ukul or Urayna came to Muhammad and found Medina unhealthy. So basically they got sick while still in Medina. So Muhammad ordered them to go and drink some camel piss and camel milk. And then they became healthy, but when they became well, they killed the herdsman of Muhammad and drove off with the camels. And when news of this reached Muhammad, he sent people in pursuit of them, and when the thieves were brought back, he ordered their hands and feet to be cut off, and nails were drawn into their eyes, and they were thrown out of Hara. I don't know what Hara is. They begged for water, but they were not supplied water.
Yeah, I heard a different version.
It was hot nails as well, wasn't it? It wasn't just nails, it was hot nails.
A different narration includes...
Yeah, there's different versions.
The nails were heated, and then they were blinded with them.
Yeah.
And they had their hands and feet cut off, and they did not cauterize them to stop the flow of blood, says the next hadith.
Well, I heard I read another version of the same story, and in that version, it doesn't mention that they killed the herders, the people, because I mean it's a capital offense, even though it's gruesome. I actually have to play devil's advocate here and say I can understand, you want to discourage outright murder and that kind of and any kind of banditry. But in the version that I originally read, it just said they apostated and drove away the creatures. And so that makes it sound like an overreaction to chop off people's hands and feet. But I mean, yeah, it's pretty brutal. And
it is. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
and the one I read, it said they had their hands and feet cut off, they were blinded, and they were left in the wasteland to chew on the rocks. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of great stuff. The Hadiths really give the Ramayana a run for its money. There are a lot of great stories in there. I'm going to bring in DJ Exclusive. Let's talk about morality in our community. DJ, you with us? Oh, wow. Boy, people have bad sound today. Okay, we're hearing miscellaneous noises and static. Try fixing your sound settings. Okay, yeah, it's completely unintelligible. I'm sorry. If you want to type out your question, we'll still be willing to address it. Boy, I wouldn't hire this DJ. No offense. Yeah, we can't hear you, buddy. We can't hear you. It's if you watch it on YouTube, you'll understand. It's just too bad. We can't. So if you can hear, assuming you can hear me, if you can type out your question, we're still willing to answer it on air. Okay.
Well, after that incident with the camels, the camel-way incident, wasn't there a verse in the Quran that then said that you can only crucify them or stone them, but you can't use fire to kill them, or something like that? As in, Muhammad went and horrifically maimed these people, and then Allah sent Gabriel a message basically telling Muhammad off, saying, you shouldn't have done that, these are the valid punishments. Does that sound familiar?
Okay, the question you typed out is, what do you think about the morality in our community world? I personally am against it.
What is morality, or what is moral? What does it mean, moral? Nobody knows.
I think it really comes down to taste in food. I mean,
exactly. There's no definition for moral.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, people will say, well, you have to. Here, you guys know Ravi Zacharias. This is one of his pet arguments. He'll say that, well, if you make any kind of moral evaluation, no matter what conclusion you come to, you are giving proof of the existence of a divine, all-powerful giver of moral law, which is absurd. I mean, every link in this chain, just like with William Lane Craig's must-haves, none of the must-haves that Ravi puts down are valid. They're all non sequiturs. If I sit down and eat some teriyaki chicken and I say, well, that was good, I'm not indexing some sort of universal standard of what tastes good or bad. So, the fact of the matter is, we use it as a shorthand for what we think, just like, and it's really just the acknowledgement that it is ultimately a matter of opinion, even if there's a great deal of convergence on that opinion, The question effectively becomes, what do you think about the things you think are good?
Well, let me think. I think they're pretty good. Well, then, in that case, what do you think about the things you think are bad? Pretty bad.
Exactly. It's nonsensical. Okay, he also, what about bad or good moral then? I don't know. He hasn't explained yet what moral is, and says, what about good or bad? So I've asked him, give an example for good or bad moral. Because I don't know what good or bad is, exactly what you're saying, Rash.
Yeah. One of the frustrating things is, some of the sleazier apologists will try to steer you onto the reefs and get you on record as saying, well, then nothing is truly wrong, which of course is absurd. I mean, given that we've laid down that, subjective morality is more than good enough for our purposes, for example, there was this guy. I mean, you were talking earlier about someone on the panel was talking about a sheikh. It was Klingschor talking about beating up this guy beating up his wife and beating up the 3-year-old. There was a case not too long ago about this guy. He married some girl. They had the girl already had a son, less than a year old, and he sodomized and beat this kid. And they arrested the guy, and there were photos of the guy. Or they arrested who he's crying. Most people, when they look at this situation, and by most, I think that to be 99.9 repeating to many digits, would say that this was not just wrong, but they'd heap abuse and disdain on the kind of person who could bring himself to do that kind of thing. Now, of course, the apologist crowd, some of the more underhanded ones, will say, "Oh yeah, but you can't say that that's wrong." Yeah, we can. We can identify cruelty. We can set down common sense criteria for what is an act of compassion. I mean, well, this goes back a little bit to our antinatalism debate. We can use pleasure, joy, suffering, and probably especially suffering as a currency or medium for measuring how compassionate a particular intention or action is. And it's really not that hard. And the fact of the matter is, religious people do it all the time. The majority of the Muslim guests that we've had on, we're trying to get them to accept their own doctrine, and they won't, because their doctrine is very callous and harsh, and they aren't necessarily. We'll show them a passage like what Klingschor is saying. It's like, okay, well, you're supposed to chop these people up and gouge out their eyes and all this crazy stuff, and the average moderate believer says, well, I don't want to do those things, so I'm going to pretend like that's not what the prophet or God meant to say, because how can the being that I've been taught since childhood is the paragon of morality, how can he do something or ask me to do something that...
someone in the channel called Devils Me asked, the question that they often get asked is, now that you're an atheist, what stops you from sleeping with your mother and your sisters? It would seem that we kind of programmed to not find attractive people that we grew up with. Most of us, that is. Of course, there's always exceptions. So it's not only that you're related to the person that makes you unattracted to them. There have been... I saw some evidence of people that were adopted into families where if they were adopted in at a much older age, it wouldn't affect them. But if they were adopted in at a much younger age, they were far less likely to find their adopted siblings attractive. And it just seems that we've got this thing that if we grow up with each other from young childhood, we tend to find each other unattractive.
Someone asked me that at the end of a long, very exasperating conversation, along the typical points, and I was at that point where I was just resorting to complete sarcasm. They said, well, if you don't believe in God, why don't you have sex? They said, what's stopping you from having sex with your sister? And I said, pepper spray. DJ is trying to get his sound settings back on.
Yeah, let's see if this works.
Okay, good. We can hear you.
Yeah, someone asked me about an example for a good or bad moral. We'll take a bad moral that's occurring right now. I can take an example from my experience. I was a UN soldier back in the time when I was stationed. They told me to kill this civilian because they had found him making bombs. And I told them I won't, because I think that's bad moral to do. Shoot someone just who makes a living. And good moral for me is that I didn't shoot him, but I got kicked out, like, instantly from the army.
Which army? I'm sorry, I do not believe the story.
You don't?
I do not believe the story.
Sorry, you don't?
No.
Well, where were you stationed? Where did you sign up? And what kind of organization? Maybe the details, if they're fleshed out properly.
I was UN soldier. I was stationed down with the other UN soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, bordered there. And that's the good moral. I think there is stuff that's have to change, because moral is just a word. You can look it up in dictionary, whatever you want, but I think it's also something you have in your brain. What you feel is wrong is mostly a bad moral. For, like, yeah, if I go out in war and shoot someone, that's going to be bad. And I have in the society there's just a lot of things going on about this good and bad moral. I would refer to a friend who made a site about this.
Okay. Well, you've given us a lot to think about, DJ. We appreciate you calling in. Take care. I didn't realize Iraq and Afghanistan shared a border. And yeah, I guess my knowledge of geography of Central Asia and the Middle East is not as good as I thought it was. I mean, I know I just bought that beachfront property in Uzbekistan. I hope that's
one quick thing, Rashman, in reference to what you were saying before, when you said that God reprimanded Muhammad, that's also mentioned in the Hadith just a little bit down, where we're told that when Muhammad cut off the hands and feet of those who had stolen his camels and had their eyes put out with heated nails, God reprimanded him on that action. And God revealed Surah 5 verse 33, where he says, the punishment of those who wage war against God and his apostle and strive with their might for mischief to the land is execution or crucifixion. So, there's the context.
Okay. So, if you want to call us, if you want to call in and join us on the show, just send a Skype contact request to The Gin and Tonic Show, or if you've already done so, just send me a message telling me what your comment or question is, and then we'll bring you on when we're ready to have more guests. Anyone else? I've drawn a complete blank because I was typing to people.
Oh, I'm kind of curious as to what kind of effects camel urine has on a human body. I wonder if there's any studies there, and was it a double-blind test? Some people were given camel urine and some were given Lucozade, and nobody knew which was which, and they checked. Could the people on camel urine run as fast as the people on Lucozade? Yeah, I'd like to know what kind of effects camel urine has on a human body, because people are always saying things that Muhammad used to tell people to do this, and look, there are medical benefits to it. One of the ones I heard was if you have sex with a woman, you have to wash yourself in dirt before praying if there's no water available. And I saw a claim that women carry more E. coli than men, so therefore Muhammad was right, and this is a miracle. But yeah, I've not seen any scientific research on whether diseases on one fly's wing have got a cure on the other wing, and because we could find some pretty good medical cures for diseases, couldn't we? Just make sure you get the right wing, and you can cure lots of people.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of crazy medical advice. My favorite from the Hadiths is if you eat 7 ajwa dates in the morning, you're safe from curses and poison for the rest of the day. And what was funny is because according to other legends, Muhammad, who gave the advice, was poisoned and cursed, so successfully. So I guess he just didn't regularly take it. I mean, if I thought there was something that gave me 100% resistance saving throw against poison and curses, I would eat it every day, even if I didn't really care for it. You know what he needed? He needed for some great Arab polymath to invent the very first little pill counter with the days of the week with the Adra dates in them, so that he would never forget. But I don't know, he blew it.
Zachary Naik always does that challenge, doesn't he, to Christians? He says, the Bible says that if you're a true believer, you'll be able to speak in tongues and no poison will harm you and stuff. You say, if you're a true believer, I've brought some poison, will you drink it? And of course they always say no. And but then I'd like to go to Zakir Naik and say, well, here are some dates, save them till the morning, eat them, and then later on you can drink your poison and we'll see if you live.
Okay, actually, thank you for joining us, Photon. You've been on the show in the past. Really quick before we go to this caller's question, somebody just sent me something interesting. They said that there have been rulings that even though gambling is supposed to be strictly forbidden, there is halal betting on horse races in some places.
Yeah, the ruling about gambling is you're not allowed to gamble on anything, but according to Islamic traditions, there are some things that are recommended. Some games shooting with bow and arrow, horse riding, and swimming are recommended. So, for some reason, earlier Muslims used to be okay with betting on gambling. Muhammad himself, on horse racing. Muhammad himself probably never saw a lot of horse racing, so I don't think he was explicit about this. But lots of early Muslim communities said, yeah, horse racing is fine because Muhammad explicitly allowed horse racing, and back in the day, horse racing always included gambling. So I think this is one of those gray areas. I think, although the majority, don't accept gambling on horse racing. But yeah, there are communities that allow this, Muslim communities that do allow this.
That's bizarre. I mean, it just seems like such a straightforward thing that, betting is, what are you going to do? I guess if it's, I don't know. I mean, if I go to a roulette table and I bet on, and I put my chips down, according to, it seems like, well, the ball will fall where Allah wishes it to fall, just like if I bet on a horse race, the horse that Allah wishes to win will win. I don't, who knows? It seems like a complete double.
It's not consistent, right? But for some reason, Muslims probably like gambling on horse races, and they didn't like other sort of gambling because they lost in other issues for some reason. They couldn't figure out. They figured out which horses were better because they had a lot of horses. So it's just a preference, and I doubt there's any. I think you're pretty clear about that. That there's no rational underpinning for these rulings, but. What do you expect 1,400 years now, right?
Well, I think that it's probably something that because there might not have been an explicit, reliable source of him condemning it, because, if you think about it, arena-type sports, chariot races, and combat with gambling and so forth, formalized, that was mostly a North Mediterranean thing, the Romans and the Greeks were into that kind of thing. I don't know if in the Hijaz they had stuff like that going on. But anyway, it seems to me like it's just a pure innovation, like something that grew up during the heyday of the swinging Umayyad years, where it was all drinking and debauchery and that kind of stuff. So, anyway, what was your question?
Yeah, my actual the thing that I want to talk about relating to morality is when we're discussing morality, like if you're discussing morality today and you ask someone, okay, what about the idea of collective punishment? Is that okay? And like if you're a Muslim, you're almost immediately thinking of the Israeli bombardment on Gaza in I think 2008, and it happened in 2006 as well. And lots of people complaining about collective punishment. That's wrong. That's immoral. You cannot punish an entire community for the crimes of a few among them. But obviously, those Muslims are not aware of the prophetic tradition, right? So this is what I just found this recently, and I was pretty surprised. The Prophet himself, and this is I'm going to quote some hadith from Bukhari in the English version. It's volume 2, book 17, hadith number 120, and I think 121 as well, where the Prophet says, Masruq narrated that Abdullah said when the Prophet saw the refusal of the people to accept Islam, he said, "Oh Allah, send famine, or send years." When you say, I'll give you the whole context, right? So it says, "Send years on them, like the 7 years at the time of Prophet Joseph." And in the Quranic story, it's like Prophet Joseph's community in Egypt had 7 years of famine. So he's basically saying, Allah sent years of famine on them, just like the 7 years of famine sent during the time of Prophet Joseph. So then the thing continued that so famine overtook them 1 year and destroyed every kind of life to such an extent that the people started eating hides, carcasses, and rotten dead animals. Whenever one of them looked towards the sky, he would imagine himself to see smoke because of hunger. So Abu Sufyan went to the Prophet and said, "Oh Muhammad, you order people to obey Allah to keep good relations with their kith and kin. No doubt the people of your tribe are dying. So please pray to Allah for them." And then so Allah revealed, "Then watch you for the day that the sky will bring forth a kind of smoke plainly invisible." So basically, this is said. It was also. It's also mentioned in the Quran, right? So the point I'm mentioning here is, if you're sending famine on an entire community, yeah, you can say maybe the adults of the community were all assholes because they didn't accept Islam, right? But what about the kids? What about the young people? They're eating hides at that point. Yeah. So this issue about and I'm sure a lot of you know this, like the Prophet's supposed to be like Uswat al-Hasana, like the best example, right? So is it okay? Is collective punishment okay? Well, according to the Prophet, it is. So when Muslims come up with the argument that like some issues are immoral, for example, collective punishment is immoral, you should ask them: is it because did you figure this out from your reasoning, or did you figure it out from the prophetic tradition? Well, if it's or from Islam. Islam allows collective punishment, but obviously no Muslim today is in favor of collective punishment, especially because of the issues in the Middle East with Israel, Palestine, and stuff like that. So this is something which is very useful, especially when discussing issues of morality with Muslims. Collective punishment, according to the Prophet, is okay. And this is in Bukhari. It's in obviously dozens of other sources, but I just mentioned Bukhari because that's the most authentic source.
Stopper Kling, do you have a comment before I jump in?
No.
Okay, well, anyway, I'm going to go out on a limb and I say that as far as I can postulate, I would say that collective punishment is always wrong, and that it always, by definition, you're punishing people who have and have not done whatever the punishment is supposed to be for. In human affairs, collective punishment is an inevitability because we're of limited thought capacity, we're of limited resources, but for an all-powerful being to engage in collective punishment is like a supreme wrong, because he has the ability to selectively punish people on an individual basis. You know, for example, in there's the biblical story of you have these plagues being sent on Egypt, and everybody is suffering, presumably even the Hebrew slaves. I mean, there's no, just as a side note, there's no evidence that their Hebrews were ever in captivity in Egypt. It's just, as far as we know, it's just lore and myth. But anyway, you have these, frogs and locusts, and presumably everybody's hurting, including the people who are, God and Moses are trying to liberate. And then finally says, okay, well, I'm going to kill the firstborn sons, but I'm going to kill all. The angel of death will pass by. That's right. They'll pass by the door of anyone who has painted their door with the blood of a lamb. Now, a wide variety of problems. I'll try to get through them quickly. If he could land such pinpoint punishments in the first place, then why the widespread famines? And in addition to that, if he knew that it would take the killing of the firstborn sons to finally crack the case, even though he was hardening, they just keep piling up. The problems with the story just keep piling up. Let's just get rid of the problem of he was hardening Pharaoh's heart, according to the story, and we'll say, okay, Pharaoh was just a really stubborn son of a gun, and the frogs and the locusts and boils, that wasn't enough. Wouldn't an all-knowing being be able to know that, why wouldn't he just go right to the ultimate punishment, and one which would only punish the Egyptians and not the Hebrews, because the Hebrews are painting the door? In addition to that, why was the blood on the door necessary? Wouldn't the angel being given information by an all-powerful being know, and this goes back to what Darash was saying, why does he need to delegate to an angel of death? Why doesn't he do it himself if he can be everywhere without any exertion or division of focus? And it just goes on and on. Bottom line, an all-powerful being could have killed only or in any way harmed the correct people, like with a surgical strike of disaster and plagues, just enough to sort of twist the Pharaoh's arm and get them to let the slaves go. So it just doesn't make any sense that someone who could, or actually, you know what a good example is. I'm sure that at least some of us watch South Park. There's one where they're with the Somalian pirates, and there's these Navy SEALs floating on a ship, and they're looking at them through the scopes, and you got the Somalian pirates, and then you have these little white kids, and then the lieutenant or what have you says, "Okay, don't shoot the white ones," and then in the foreheads of the Somalian pirates appear bullet holes because they're snipers and they're highly trained and they can just kill the people they want to live, the people they want to die. And it seems that an all-powerful being to ever harm a single hair on the single head that he didn't mean to or didn't need to, it's completely unjustified. In human affairs, however, it is an unfortunate inevitability that people get caught in the crossfire of different conflicts. I'm not trying to act as, I know that you mentioned the Israeli-Palestinian thing where, there's been a lot of collective punishment and judgment on both sides. Far be it from me to downplay anything that's happened to either the victims on either side.
Not only collectively punish, but also put them in a position where if they want to live, they must commit the crime. So Allah stops sending fish for all the days of the week except the Shabbat. And then on the day of the Shabbat, all the fish come. And then on the next day, all the fish are gone again for the next 6 days. And the Jews are sitting there going, "Oh, I'm starving, I could murder some fish." But there's no fish to be had. And then Saturday comes along again, and all the fish come back. And Allah was just testing them to see if they'd break the Shabbat rules. And then one day, they were so hungry from having a lack of fish, they went out and fished. So Allah turned them all into apes.
That's in the Quran itself. And the issue about sending collective punishment, there are degrees of collective punishment, right? But according to Islam, Allah actually sent a famine for a whole year. So a whole year they have no food and they're eating. That's a slow, torturous death. That's pretty bad. That's really bad.
Yeah, but like I said, the bottom line is when you're talking about collective punishment, you're talking about punishing people A, B, and C, where person A and C are guilty of the offense and B is not. We're forced to do things like this from time to time. If I'm investigating a crime, I guess a lot of people will be inconvenienced as I look for suspects in a certain neighborhood. So you can say they're all being punished, but ultimately I only really want to punish and sentence the person who actually committed the crime that I'm investigating. So like I said, it is just a byproduct of our lack of perfection. But like I said, a perfect being never has its options limited. So there's no excuse for a perfect being or an all-powerful being to ever use this kind of a system or to certainly to encourage it amongst his creation. That doesn't make any sense.
It seems that the more powerful the entity is, the worse they are at being effective. And it's like, oh, well, I'm extremely powerful, I can do absolutely anything. There's a problem down there. All these people believe in magic rocks. How am I going to solve this? Well, I could just make them all realise that that's really stupid, or I could magic up an angel with lots and lots of wings that's invisible to everyone except for one man, have him whisper stuff to him, and then he can tell everyone. And not everyone will understand him, so I'd better make sure that they know they'll burn in hell forever if they don't. Islam was started when a man was able to convince people who believed in magic rocks that an invisible man with wings was talking to him.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add one other thing. Right? It's not just about like the concept of God over here. The reason I mentioned this example is because it explicitly states that the Prophet used to pray for this every day after Fajr prayer. So if you read the Hadith in Bukhari, it says like he used to pray for this every day. He's praying for collective punishment. So the question isn't about like, lots of people say, oh, well, God commanded us. He's a creator. He can do what he wants. It's up to him. But the thing is, Muhammad is supposed to be like the perfect example for all mankind, not just Muslims. Well, is it okay then? Is collective punishment okay in this case? This is like a really, really solid case when people talk about the morality of Islam. There's absolutely no answer for this collective this issue, the dilemma of collective punishment. Muslims don't even touch this topic in debates and so on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention one other hadith, which doesn't have to do with morality, but it's to do with the Israelites in Egypt and stuff like this. I found it kind of funny, so I thought I'd mention that. But like, did you want to add something first?
You're being asked to cite what your source is.
Oh yeah.
People are saying, can you tell us what your source is?
I already mentioned this. Okay. It's the hadith about the famine.
I don't know what they're asking for. They're just saying, what source are you looking for? And someone else saying, can you tell us what your source is?
Yeah, okay. I'm telling you, I'm getting these hadiths are from Sahih Bukhari, right? So this is like the most authentic book after the Quran. In the English version of the book, it's volume 2, book 17, hadith 120 or 121. They both have the same thing. The 121 has the verses of the Quran. 120 doesn't have the verse of the Quran. There are two different narrators and there are multiple chains. So this is 100% authentic. Anyway, so like in Bukhari. If you want the Arabic version, it's Hadith 1006 and 1007. But in the English translation, they have a different system. So it's volume 2, book 17, Hadith 120 and 121. If you go to sunnah.com, which is a website which has its own translations, over there they have it in book 15 hadith 2 and book 15 hadith 3. So it's like they're different editions and the different versions, but like just search for famine in Sahih Bukhari, you'll find it. But in the English translation, the Mohsen Khan one, it's volume 2, book 17, hadith 120 and 121. In the on sunnah.com, which has better translation in my opinion, it's book 15 hadith 2, book 15 hadith 3. Okay, so hopefully that should clarify this issue. So yes, always keep these hadiths in your armory. They're absolutely brilliant when it comes to arguing with Muslims about morality issues. So keep that with you, right? So anyway, so I'll mention this one other hadith about the Israelites being turned into rats, which is kind of funny too. It's because this has to do with the Israelites in Egypt and stuff. So the Prophet said, and this is narrated by Abu Huraira, and who said, the Prophet said, a group of Israelites were lost. Nobody knows what they did, but I do not see them except that they were cursed and changed into rats. So this is no longer them being changed into monkeys or apes or swine and stuff. Now these were changed into rats. And so he says, and they were changed into rats, for if you put the milk of a she-camel in front of a rat, it will not drink it. But if the milk of a sheep is put in front of it, it will drink it. So this is, okay, again I'll mention the reference. It's volume 4, in Bukhari of course, Sahih Bukhari, volume 4, book 54, hadith number 524. So this is like something that you can test right now. Get a rat. Like rats are omnivorous animals. They'll have everything. Like they'll eat plastic and shit too, right? So if you put milk in front of rats, really, a rat can differentiate between camel milk and sheep milk. If some scientists can actually do this experiment and show that rats have the ability to distinguish between one sort of milk and the other, then yeah, he'll get some Nobel Prize in chemistry or some stuff. But this is so crazy that. It's funny that they made these hadiths made their way into their authentic books, but they're so insane, and at least the Sunnis are required to believe in them.
Yeah, What can you do? I mean, the whole thing about rats drinking different kinds of
scientific miracle, guys. I just realized it's a scientific miracle. Because now Hitler, in the concentration camp, in his propaganda, he compared Jews to rats, and he'd show footage of rats in the streets and stuff in his Nazi propaganda films. So Muhammad, this is clearly like scientific foreknowledge miracle right here, where Muhammad was able to foresee the Holocaust.
Well, not only foresee it, but also enact part of it by having mass graves for Jews.
This is further evidence. Bismillah, you know, fucking Shahada. Oh, I'm converting right now. That's it. Insert Arabic words.
Yeah, you know, the thing about the rats drinking the milk of different animals, you know, one thing, Muhammad's stories and metaphors and you know, things about, things like this, they never really impressed me. You know, it's like, he said once, yeah, they're like dogs who, if you chase them, they'll pant, and if you don't chase them, they'll still pant. And I'm like, that is the worst analogy ever. It is completely pointless and stupid. And then another one, he said, yeah, they couldn't even create a fly. And if they did create a fly, the fly would steal something from them and fly away. And I thought, is this the best you can come up with? I mean, you really ought to lock yourself in a room and be like crumpled pieces of paper. Let's just say he could write in middle age. I think later, some people have been telling me that he learned before his death to write something.
Right, later on in his life, according to the consensus of scholars, that he was able to write. The Quran says he wasn't able to write, right? So it's quite possible that the reality is that he wasn't able to write at all, read or write at all. But according to the majority of sources now, it says that later on he couldn't write. I mean, he could write by the end of his career. It's possible because apparently there's some letters written by him, but we don't know for sure. The Quran doesn't make any notion, and that's the earliest text that he could actually write.
Isn't there some account that on his deathbed he asked for a pen?
Yeah, pen and paper. Yeah,
something.
That's right.
The thing is the guy was probably just a dyslexic. You know, they didn't know about dyslexia back then. He can't write, so everyone thinks, well, he's a bit stupid. And they were wrong. You know, the guy was really clever. He just had a brain that was wired slightly differently, and he just got all his letters jumbled up, especially being as there were no dots on them. You know, it must have been pretty difficult, mustn't it?
And the Quran doesn't really say that he was illiterate.
I think that if he learned to read and write later in life, I think that's a great thing. We here at the Gin and Tonic Show fully support adult literacy programs all over the world. But at any rate, he should have just locked himself in a room and been like, you know, with these little maxims. You know, basically he doesn't hold a candle to like Lao Tzu or anyone like that when it comes to these one-liners. They're just and always involving these like barnyard animals from Arabia that just nobody outside the region or of that time could conceivably relate to. You know, it's like in the States. You know you're a redneck when, you know, every, you know, maxim or moral or proverb you say has, you know, cows and pigs and sheep in it. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, he's like a rat in a tin shit house, or yeah, he's better than a pig and shit, or like, yeah, you know, dog's this, and you know, your horse is such and such when such and such a situation arrives. It's just when I'm reading this book, it's supposed to be the, you know, the word of a all-knowing being, and he sounds like Cletus from Oklahoma. It didn't really. I mean, how can I tell Muslims who think that it's this wonderful, beautiful, insightful book? I don't understand how I can tell them in completely inoffensive terms that I'm just not impressed with this level of discourse. But anyway. Oh, one thing, I'd like to go back to a topic. We talked with Infidel always about the first cause and so forth. And what I got to thinking with my whole thing about Moses and the painted doors and how an all-powerful being would have pinpoint punishments. You know, a lot of creationists or, you know, religious people in general, some people who aren't really young Earth creationists, but say, well, either evolution or the Big Bang was divinely motivated, and that if, you know, the God is really the first cause and so forth. And then they like to stick us with the fact that we haven't unraveled all of the mysteries about how the physical world and the known universe began. I think it really boils down to this. An all-powerful being would never find the dissatisfaction in order to want to create a world, and certainly not the world in which we live, where all the major world religions are constantly bringing up these issues where they claim that an all-powerful being has its options limited or has its hands tied. And what got me thinking that way was, you'll talk to religious people and they'll say, well, in such and such a case, God had to do this. Like with Christians, God had to, come down as Jesus and sacrifice himself and so forth, or God had to punish these people. He had to do that. And I always think, well, he doesn't have to do anything. Why? How can his options ever be limited with all the power and wisdom and more importantly creativity that such a being would have? Why would its options ever be limited to the point where it had to do something? So it was not necessary. If you had a being of that description existing alone, he would have no need to create a universe at all. So if anything, that is the final nail in the coffin of the argument for God for me, is because I can't imagine that a perfect being would ever be so dissatisfied that he'd say, well, I even though I'm perfect, I need something more. I need to change the state, because it seems that restlessness or impatience or what have you, or the loneliness maybe, that would be a form of imperfection. And they keep saying that it would have to be a perfect being. Okay, end of rant. So, Photon, thank you for joining us. Please come back again. Salam. Take care. Okay. I think we've got like 11 minutes left in the show. Anyone else have another news item or a topic? Or I think we've exhausted our guest list. There was one person who sent me a message, and then I poked him, and he didn't poke back, so I'm not going to call him.
Have we come any closer to establishing what moral or morality or moral values actually are?
Yeah, nothing about what we talked about had anything to do with the topic today, which is fine. Oh, yeah, someone sent me a message just now. This is probably one that Klingschor didn't jump at to answer. It says, did Muhammad do something immoral that was considered immoral before Islam in Arabia?
Yes. Great example is following the Battle of Hunain, there was a smaller skirmish or raid where some Muslims went and raided at Altas, and they took a bunch of women captive. And they did not want to have sex with them, i.e. rape them, because they had husbands among the polytheists. And so they were reluctant to do so. And so that demonstrates that they didn't want to do that. That was their morals not to do that. And then Muhammad was like, wait guys, don't worry. Revelation from God here. Yeah. You can access married women if they're ma malakat namanikum, if they're those whom your right hand possesses. So it's okay, guys. And actually, there were pre-Islamic poems where guys, a really famous one where this guy is boasting about how he wouldn't rape captured women in battle because that's how awesome he was. And so that was an ideal. And Muhammad came along and said, "No, you can rape your captive women. They're malakat namanikum. You're those whom your right hand possesses. They're your property. They're fine for you to have sex with, whatever." So that's an example.
Yeah, that was the thing is, Muhammad seemed really upset about the treatment he received early on in his career, and he constantly speaks about the Jahiliyyah days and the pre-Muslim Arabs and how terrible they were. But you do see examples of them not being infinitely evil. Way back when I was really young and I was still a Christian, I would read about, Israel versus the surrounding states, right? And it'd be like, okay, well, Babylon this, and then the Philistines that, and the Assyrians this, and all these different, and Egypt, and all these other different states around that were, and other tribes, that were, terrorizing the Hebrews or being terrorized by them. And I remember, even when I was very young, I used to think, well, if these people were completely without even a concept of morality, how did they build empires? I mean, wouldn't everybody be thieving and stealing, and wouldn't the society just collapse? That was one of the very earliest problems I had, is, how could, a just truly evil nation where every how could it even be stable? If you have, parents that hate their own children, or people poisoning and killing each other. I mean, how could it possibly arise to any level of stability to where it could rival the state that's supposed to be, built on God's law, which is supposed to be ideal? It never made any sense how you could build even a remotely stable society. And obviously, we look at pre-Islamic societies, we look at pre-Abrahamic societies, and they certainly had moral codes. They certainly had some of the same values that later major world religions would teach. They had some very similar superstitions, as a matter of fact, but it never really computed. And there are some cases like, of course, Muhammad and his followers were very badly persecuted in their early days in Mecca. But if the Meccans were as bad as he says they were, why didn't they just kill him? Why didn't they just have him? Why didn't they just murder him when they had the chance? Why did the people of Taif drive him out when they had an opportunity to get him and kill him if they were, so infinitely evil? And then there was a time where there was an armistice where he was allowed to visit, to go on a pilgrimage to Mecca. And I thought, well, why didn't the Meccans hide and get him there if they just had no values and no regard for anything, and would kill people even on a sacred site? So it never added up. It never added up that someone could say that, okay, well, these people, they are godless, and therefore they are as maximally immoral as you could ever be in all ways. And it's amazing that kind of thinking still finds traction amongst Christians and Muslims today. I mean, even when you're talking to a believer who isn't very hostile or aggressive, I'm still amazed at their amazement that I have any kind of value system at all. They're just bewildered. It's like, well, you don't believe in such and such a supernatural entity. Well, where in the world do you get your morality from? I don't understand why that question is ever asked by anyone. Where do you get your morality from, then? Well, you get it from yourself. Yes. Rash or Stop, you guys have a comment?
Metaphors. Surah 2, 171. The likeness of those who disbelieve is as the likeness of one who calls unto that which hears nothing except for shouts and cries. So, how poor is that? Another one is people who turn to people other than Allah are like spiders. Let's say the metaphor of those who take protectors besides Allah is that of a spider which builds itself a house. But no house is flimsier than a spider's house, if only they knew.
Well, see,
I'm sure that any spider that builds a house, a home, any spider which builds a home does it for a reason, and it's beneficial in some way, and that if the spider didn't build that home, like, say, for example, a trapdoor spider builds what could be loosely termed a home, if trapdoor spiders didn't build trapdoor spider homes, then they would probably starve. So, spider homes can be quite beneficial in some circumstances. So those who take protectors besides Allah are the same as spiders that build really useful things. And actually, if we prove that there is a house of an animal that's flimsier than a spider's house, then of course you could prove an absolute scientific error in the Quran there.
Well, see, what you have to do is apply a scientific linguistic analysis of the verse to understand the truth of the matter, and whatever.
Well, okay, if you really look at the original Arabic and you pretend it means the exact opposite, what he's saying is there's no stronger house than a spider's house, and he's predicting the fact that Western modern scientists would discover that spider silk, per its tensile strength, is stronger than steel alloy. So it's just another miracle.
First and foremost,
yeah.
you know, scientific linguistic miracle.
Can I tell you what I was told today? This is my opinion about people like you. Many are the jinns and men we have made for hell. They have hearts wherewith they understand not, eyes wherewith they see not, and ears wherewith they hear not. They are like cattle, nay, more misguided, for they are heedless of warning. This is what I was told today because I dared go and contradict what somebody said in some stupid post. And this is the kind of moral attitude that people have, that if somebody says something, even the slightest negative, they go and they compare you to cattle, they tell you this, they tell you that, and they immediately threaten you with hell and hellfire. Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, they're very quick to disqualify. It's a shame. It's a shame that they won't engage. What are you going to do?
Have him apologize.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think the whole thing about health. Yeah, good luck. I mean, if someone hates you enough that they think that you deserve, you know, infinite punishment. I mean, Rash told us this story once about how he and his friends were playing around and he burned his face with fire. Now, some people, unless they've had an accident like that or they've been to war and seen people with their limbs blown off, they don't understand what, you know, severe physical injury and pain can truly be like, you know. But, I mean, if you've ever had a kidney stone, for example, just imagine having a kidney stone every day for the rest of your life, then, you know, anybody who would wish that on someone else, really for what comes down to a difference of opinion, you know, it is just so infinitely sadistic. So good luck getting an apology from someone with that kind of a viewpoint.
I think human minds do tend to have this bullshitometer, and you can break it by going too far off the deep end. So if you're in the office one day and someone comes in at 10 o'clock and you say, you know, normally this person's late, they're on their last warning for being late, and they come in and you say, right, you're late, you're going to be fired, and they say, look, I would definitely not come in late for work on my final warning for being late. The reason I'm late is because I was just about to leave for work and my nan had a heart attack, and I had to drag her out into the car because the ambulances were all out on other calls, and on the way to the hospital I had a crash, and then I had to get out of the car, flag down another car and get to the hospital just in time to save my nan's life. And the person listening to it is like, I'm sure this is bullshit, but who would make up a story that's that obviously bullshit, so it must therefore be true?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think if you're using it as a metaphor for hell, I think hell is too good to be true. That in the mind of someone who's really just petty and sadistic and hateful, it's just too good to be true. I mean, how much more often do we hear people talk about hell rather than heaven? What do you think the ratio is, just off the top of your head? I guess
90-10.
10 to 1, yeah? I was about to say the same thing. It's about 10 to 1. They're just obsessed. Have you... In Muslim heaven, which is the only really well thought out thing about the doctrine, in my opinion, because it sounds great. You know, you got all these servants, and you got gardens with rivers. You have all that.
No. You have to look at this. The whole thing is a fake, because the God of the Muslims fakes the whole thing with Jesus, making him look as though Jesus was somehow killed and not. Then they send you to heaven, where they say you have all these virgins, which are not actually virgins, because they are fake virgins, because they've been done over 15,000 times. All they have is the replacement of the hymen. It's a fake.
Well, anyway, your killjoyishness notwithstanding,
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I destroy it?
Well, I'm just saying that if something like that, something like that could be real, that would be pretty awesome. I mean, even the landscape, they say, well, there's shade, there's running water, it's very green.
There's wine that doesn't even get you drunk.
Maybe it gets you a little tipsy. I don't know. I mean, why? It just loosens your inhibitions enough, right? Okay. Or maybe it's very good tasting wine. I don't know. Anyway, but of course the big draw is the women, the big golden brothel in the sky that Islam wisely put in with his doctrine, because Christian heaven sounds boring as fuck. You know, it's like, okay, streets of gold in a world where we don't need currency. That's Christian heaven. You know, you don't need money, but the streets are made with gold. Okay, and you worship God forever and you sing hymnals. And, I mean, that sounds awful, but Muslim heaven, it's all about, like, drinking and feasting and having sex, and that sounds great. It's like a holodeck. It's like what most people would do if they had an actual working holodeck. They would say, computer, Earl Grey, also run Muslim heaven program 05. That's all anybody would do, let's face it. That's all anyone would do, and they would never leave if they had an... So, I mean... That is, if you can suspend your belief enough to believe in a supernatural realm, you think that you're going to. That's awesome. You don't know the things that I would do to earn that kind of reward if I thought it was real. But what I'm saying is that, you know, you got Christians and Muslims who believe that they're going to get this, go to heaven, and all they want to talk about is hell. You know, if we all became just bitter enemies, or I got to go to Muslim heaven, or even if I got the holodeck, you know, and then that's revenge enough that I have it and you don't. I mean, that's the worst revenge than I think most people would reasonably wish on their worst enemies. Is you get this amazing reward, and then your enemies get to see you get it. And they're just denied. They just go back to their normal life. They go back to eating cold cereal. Oh, what is it? The Prophet Charlie Sheen. Wait, I messed it up. What is it? It's been so long since I've said the blessing on the Prophet's name. I forgot how it goes. Damn it! I forgot. I messed it up. Anyway,
how did you get the guy?
Klingschor. What is that? What is the blessing that goes after?
I don't know, Shamalama Ding Dong. Who cares?
Oh, come on. No, the Arabic. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Thank you. Someone in the chat finally came to my rescue as I'm flailing around here. I just drew a complete blank. Yeah, okay. The Prophet Charlie Sheen, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, yeah, you know, you can hate on me, but you have to go back to living with you have to go look at your ugly wife and your ugly kids, and you have to live your boring life and all that. And then, like I said, if someone has to go back to their ordinary, mundane existence, and you got to go to this wonderful paradise that lasts forever, wouldn't that be revenge enough? I mean, wouldn't you be more excited about getting those good things? But it's just every Christian and a lot of Muslims, it's always hell, hell, hell. They're just sitting there just fantasizing about hell and how great it'll be. Not for them, but for you to be in it, because you disagreed or you poke fun at them. It's amazing.
Yeah, you look at the people of the time, and the heaven that's described by Muhammad. Yeah, you've got people living in an environment that's often arid, so heaven's going to have lots of rivers. They've got raiding parties going and raiding each other's villages and taking the women and having sex with them. So in heaven there's going to be lots of sex. And the only one that stands out is alcohol. Muhammad said that they're not allowed to drink alcohol, but in heaven they'll get lots of alcohol. And it occurs to me that these people love to have a drink, but Muhammad needed them to be sober so that he could go out killing people with him. Because if they all turned up pissed, they'd be crap at fighting.
Yeah.
So he had to keep them sober for now, but he couldn't say to them, no, alcohol's a big sin. Because then they'll think, well, this is crap, because sex and a shag are the only two things I live for. Are you going to... booze and a shag are the only two things I live for. Are you going to take booze off me? You go, oh, well, if you abstain from it for now, you can have an infinite amount in the afterlife. So you know, he's obviously told them that so that they wouldn't all turn up pissed up for the scrap and get killed.
Actually, I just want to quickly make a side point here because we're talking about morality. I think it's quite funny, and there's a funny meme that I made of Hamza Sortsis where it's like criticizes the West for pornography, worships holy book containing pornography, and that's the thing. Like and this is very common. The Quran describes the what is it, the Hurul or something, the virgins with the pale skin and big beautiful eyes as being kawaib, which means beautiful young women with protuberant developing breasts. So it's explicitly saying that they've got big boobs. Like,
yeah.
Where does this moral high ground come from with all these Muslims who are always like, oh, you know, pornography is so bad, pornography has infected the West, la la la, and their holy book contains pornography.
Yeah, but it hasn't got any pictures. It's not a picture book, is it?
Yeah, but come on, I mean, it's describing them as
moral.
Or you could describe them in.
Instead of what
they say the Bible. They say the Bible
they're reclining,
as the alternative, and the Bible.
But they're reclining in marriage beds.
You could also say Hamza Sources believes in Holy Book, which forbids gambling, uses Pascal's wager to try to make you believe it's true.
Okay, on a completely...
A lot of people use the only alternative to Islam being Christianity. And in the Bible, you have a lot more pornography than you do in the Quran. So for them, the only alternative to the Quran is the Bible, and there it's worse.
Okay, on a completely unrelated note, someone has linked me a hadith from Bukhari that I absolutely have to synopsize for you. Now, for people who don't know... the Sahih al-Bukhari is to the Quran what the Silmarillion is to Lord of the Rings, okay? It's the second most authentic book. It's a story of the Prophet...
Sunni Islam, every single hadith in al-Bukhari is authentic.
Yeah, now here...
Every single one.
This is narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle, that's Muhammad, says that King Solomon, who was a Muslim, by the way, according to tradition, he said, tonight I will sleep with 90 women, each of whom will, be impregnated and bear me a son who will be a powerful warrior and cavalryman for the cause of Allah. But he didn't say Allah willing, which is like Simon Says. And as a result, of the 90 women, 89 of them failed to conceive, and the 90th gave birth to a midget.
Well, that's brilliant. Midgets are brilliant. So it's like, bad news, you didn't have any sons. Good news, here's a midget.
Yeah, and they said if he had said Allah willing afterwards, inshallah, then his wish would have come true and the 90 powerful warriors would have been born from his 90 wives. I don't know. Maybe Solomon was looking to gift horse in the mouth. Maybe the midget was really Lord Tyrion from Game of Thrones, and he would become a great general and tactician. But
somebody takes the whole thing serious.
I don't know.
It's another scientific miracle. Muhammad was foreseeing Game of Thrones and Tyrion.
Yeah.
This is, oh my goodness. Oh, mercy of Allah. This is so beautiful and amazing and linguistically scientific.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, I think that's enough shenanigans for one day. What a silly episode this has been. Thank you to all of our co-hosts, Stopspamming, Rationalizer, Klingschor. Thank you to all of our callers. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks with more nonsense and bullshit and midgets
and Oliver,
camel piss and monkey men killing demons with I don't know what.
Combined with wrestling in camel urine.
Also, wait. Also, guys, check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and all that jazz.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.